Hello friends, and welcome back to part 2 of the tutorial to knit the cranberry cardigan. I hope that y'all liked part 1. If you're looking for part 1, it should be right here, and then also I'll probably link it in the description. So let's just dive right into the second half of this tutorial.
Next, we're going to start working the sleeves.
I have the panel in between our 2 stitch markers on our sleeves, and I picked up 3 stitches, skipped 1, so basically skipped every 4th stitch, and that gave me a total of 83 stitches right here on my needles. So now we want to make sure our carriage is on 4.5, our row counter is at 0, and we're also going to set our carriage to hold. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put every one of these stitches except for the center 37 out into hold. And when I say except for the center 37, basically you can ignore this seam. Imagine this panel as if it's all one, so everything from the 0 here is our center that we're talking about. So now we take our yarn and we just start knitting. First we're going to knit 2 rows as normal. There we go. After this first row here, we're going to wrap our yarn, quickly inspect, make sure all of the stitches got picked up correctly. This one looks like it wasn't. Okay, good. Everything looks good now. One more row. Okay. Then we wrap. And now that we've knit 2 rows, we're going to start working on taking these stitches off of hold. So we wrapped 1, and then we're going to put this guy back into work. So we're going to knit 1, wrap it, put 1 stitch over here, back into work. And the only time we're going to really differ from that pattern is when we get to multiples of 8. So on rows 8 and 9, we're going to actually put 2 back into work. And then on rows 16 and 17 and 24 and 25, and then 32 and 33, we're going to do the same thing.
Here's an example of what we would do once we get to row 8 and row 9.
Okay, so now we're on row 16, which is one of the rows that we're going to decrease twice. So we're going to put 2 of these needles back into work. Wrap, and then we do the same on row 17. Put 2 of the needles back into work. And now we just repeat the rest of the way.
24.
Okay, we're now on RC equals 39, and now we can begin the rest of the sleeve. For this section of the sleeve, we are going to knit 4 and then decrease 1 on both sides, and we're going to do that until RC equals 111. So now that we knit to row 111 and we have our sleeve all done, what we're going to do is we cast off with waste yarn. You can see that I've already done that here. And then we're going to put our stitches back on our needles, and we're going to essentially reduce 9 stitches so that we have 38 stitches in work. So you can keep your stitches on your needles to do that if you like. I prefer to cast off with waste yarn, so when we do the ribbing we have something to drop down to, and it's easy to like pick up our ribbing and latch hook it up. In an effort to reduce the 9 stitches that we need to reduce, we're going to put 4 stitches on our needles, and then we're going to take our 5th and we're going to put it on the same needle as our previous one. So basically you're doing a decrease every 5th stitch, give or take. It's slightly, it's a slight estimation. Now that we have our stitches on our needles, we are going to make sure our row counter's at 3.5, make sure our tension dial's at 0, and we're going to take our second yarn color, the kind of browner color I'm picking for the ribbing, and we're going to knit 30 rows. All right, and now we are going to drop and latch hook these back up. So every 2, voila. And then we just drop these all off our needles. And we tug. And then we just latch hook these guys back up. So we find the purl bump in between our cast off stitches. You can see it right there. And then insert our latch hook. There we go. And then we just pick up the bar above it and the bar above that. And we just keep going the rest of the way. There we go. And then we do that for our whole panel.
And then we just cast off and we repeat all of these steps to make our second sleeve. Wrap, put one back into work. one back into work.
So we're at 39 rows now. I'm going to decrease one on both sides every 4 rows. Okay, so I put all my stitches back onto my needles for the back panel here, and now I'm going to work on the ribbing. So I have my yarn color B, my tension's at 4.5, and I'm going to start by knitting 12 rows. Okay, and that looks like a good amount of ribbing, so now I'm going to drop every 3rd stitch. Okay, and we're going to knit these back up using our latch hook. Alright, we're going to do that with every stitch that we dropped.
And once we're done with knitting those stitches back up with our latch hook, we are going to just cast off. Alright, and now we just repeat that same process on the other 2 front panels. Now that we've finished with all the bottom hemline ribbing, we're going to move on to the inner ribbing.
So now we are going to work on the final bit of ribbing, the ribbing that will help us basically button this together later. This is the right side of our sweater, so if I put this on right now, that would be the right armhole right there. So that means that this ribbing, we're going to have the buttonholes, and the ribbing on the left side of the sweater is going to be normal ribbing, and we're going to seam or sew the buttons to the ribbing that we create on this side. So this is the tricky ribbing because we have to incorporate buttonholes, and I wanted to give you a visual representation of where those buttonholes are going to be. So for starters, I have 80 needles in work right here. And what I've done is I've kind of visually shown you where all of our ribbing will be. All of these like little guys, that's all our ribbing. These big guys are where we want to put our buttonholes. We're also going to do ribbing on these because it will make the buttonholes look much more round and much less oval. So here's a quick little representation of what happens when you use non-pearl rows. So we end up with this. This is a test swatch that I made. As you can see right here, we have a pretty nice round buttonhole. These are quite wide and quite long, which, to be fair, is the standard buttonhole. You kind of want an eye shape. But I am using these pretty buttons that are quite small, so I wanted a smaller buttonhole, and we get a smaller buttonhole with this. So if you want a larger buttonhole, follow this technique, but make sure that your buttonholes are on non-pearl bump rows. If you want the round technique here and you want to go with a smaller button like I am, then make sure you use pearl bump rows. Here are the stitches that I selected to have the buttons. It's from the left, we have stitch number 6, stitch number 23, stitch number 45, stitch number 63, and 78. I'm sure you can do the math and see they're not quite even, but that is partially by design. If it was even, we would have kind of a bigger gap here. And I've noticed that in a lot of sweaters and button-ups in general, you want an extra button up here because you just tend to button up this section of your sweater more often. And then back here, I kind of made it even, but I wanted to make sure I included buttons on both ends of the ribbing, so you could either button up the collar here or you could button up the very bottom and it would still look cohesive. You wouldn't just have like a flap open at the bottom even if all of it was buttoned. So now I'm going to put all of these back into work. We're going to change our tension dial to 4. We're going to change our row counter to 0. And we're going to use our color B. And we are going to knit 3 rows. Okay. Now, what we need to do is we need to locate the stitches that we want to create the buttons with. So just for a reminder, that's stitch number 6, stitch 24, stitch 45, stitch 63, and stitch 78. And what we're going to do is we're going to drop and knit these stitches back up with our latch hook. And then instead of putting it back on our needle, we are going to put it on the needle right next to it so that that needle is now out of work. All right, and now we make sure that all of those stitches that we don't want to knit are not in work. So now we're going to knit 1 row. And then we're going to put our out of work needles back into work.
Knit 4 more rows.
All right, and now we are just going to drop our stitches and knit as normal. I'm going to go ahead and show you real quick how you would knit back up one of our buttonholes. It's just the same. You drop it down. It's only going to stop here. You kind of have to remember where the hole is. Insert your stitch, and then you just knit up like this.
And then we are going to drop every third stitch and knit them all back up using our latch hook.
And now we just bind off.
All right, and all we need to do now is we're going to put the left side of our sweater hem onto the panel here. We're going to also pick up 80 rows, make sure it's wrong side facing. And this time we just knit as normal. We don't have to deal with any buttonholes or anything, so we're just going to knit, drop every third stitch, knit that back up, and cast off, and then the bulk of our sweater will be done. All that's left is seaming, adding in the buttons, and blocking, and we'll be set to wear this bad boy. So here we have everything that we need to start working on putting the buttons on our sweater. So I've laid this flat, and you'll want to do the same. Go ahead and lay it flat, and you want to overlap this ribbed row right here. Make sure it's overlapping evenly and nicely, and then you want to take your stitch marker, find one of the buttonholes, and literally place your stitch marker in the buttonhole as if it was a button, but make sure that it's on the bottom one. And that's where we're gonna put our button later. So we're gonna do that with all of our buttonholes. Okay, and then let's go ahead and peel this up and just kind of see where our buttonholes sit. So it seems that they sit more to the left, but we at least know what row we want them to be on. So this guy sits perfectly in the middle. We're gonna go ahead and move this, like take this row here of ribbing, and we're just gonna put our button in the middle of that row of ribbing. Same here, and this one's pretty much in the middle nicely. So first, you need some sort of thread. I have a color that's close-ish, so I'll be using that. We have our buttons, and we have a spare pin, and we have some sewing needles. We also need scissors for our thread, which I have right here. So first things first, we're just gonna get some thread. Oh my God, don't cut your work. Oh, okay. It was scary. So now we're gonna knot our thread. I also want the knot to be quite big because yarn is a lot thicker of a fiber, so the gaps are a lot wider than like a standard blouse or a t-shirt or anything like that. Okay, and then I'm going to choose one of my needles. I'll go with this guy because I think he can fit through my buttonhole.
Now we take the non-knotted end and we thread our needle. And now we take one of our buttons. We're gonna need to take this guy off and just kind of remember where he is. Go in from the back side. Thread. I'm just creating a quick little bit of structure because, like I said before, it's really easy to pull your yarn knots through. In fact, I've done it every time. So I'm just kind of making a place for my thread to sit, essentially. Okay, and then we insert our needle. I think I did it a little too medially. I think I need to do it a little out a bit more. There we go. And I'm going to basically drop my button onto it. Make sure you like where that sits. It looks good to me. Then we pull through. And we're gonna use this and put it right here in between our button. And the idea with that is it gives it space so that it kind of comes up off of your ribbing, which honestly I think it could work without it because like the yarn that we're using is so flexible, it should be okay. But we're gonna use it anyways. Okay, and then you insert your needle and you knit again. And that should hold your danger needle in place. And then we just repeat, because my buttons are just 2 buttonholes. If you have 4, then you want to come up out through a different one, but I only have the 2, so it's going to be just the same over and over. And I'm going to do it until I feel like my button is secure, at least 8 times. Okay, and then we just want to bind off by making a knot or 2 back here. Take out our needle. Okay, and as you can see, I did not do an amazing job of making that horizontal, but that's fine, we're learning. And now we test it to see, and it fits through beautifully. Look at that. If you feel like you have a buttonhole where your button goes through quite nicely but comes out a little too easily, then something you can do is you can line the outside of your button with elastic thread. Just do it on the inside of your sweater so it's not visible, and that will like help it cinch around the button and it'd be nice and stretchy. So you did it, and now you have your very own cranberry cardigan. Honestly, I think that this would kind of slap in any color, but if I was going to make it again, I would either make it as like a heather gray and like a dark gray or like a black, or a like heathered green and a dark green. I think that those would both be really cute color combinations, and I know that the same company that makes this yarn also does pretty grays and greens. So that's definitely an idea if you want to redo this pattern and you know, make it in a different style. Thank you for watching the video. If you purchased my pattern, thank you for that. If you guys want to see the design process video, which secretly that is my favorite part of this, is the designing and the figuring it out, like how do I make this pattern, like what is the process of that, that's my favorite part. So if you guys want to watch that video, I would recommend subscribing and turning on your notifications so that, you know, once I post it, you get notified. Otherwise, thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Bye!